As you know, it is Thanksgiving Eve, and Donald Trump was tweeting a lot today. And we're not going to report on the actual words in any of those tweets because they're not newsworthy, other than for the general point that, yet again, politically, Trump's trying to drum up controversies over the national anthem and basketball, which will probably reverberate at some Thanksgiving dinners tomorrow. You can look forward to that. The story we are going to report on tonight, with far more reaching consequences, is one Trump isn't tweeting about: allegations that he's turning a once obscure part of the Justice Department into a weapon against those who criticize him. The DOJ basically trying to take Time Warner to court to block a merger with AT&T, and their company's CEO says it's not a surprise that one question keeps coming up: whether this is all an effort to retaliate against CNN.
There's been a lot of reporting and speculation whether this is all about CNN. And frankly, I don't know. But nobody should be surprised that the question keeps coming up.
The question does keep coming up, and it's because of Trump's ongoing fight with CNN. Sources told CNBC that the DOJ wanted AT&T to sell Turner Broadcasting, which includes CNN, as a condition for approval of this merger that they're now fighting. This appearance of an abuse of power comes, of course, just days after Trump was pleading with the DOJ to investigate Hillary Clinton.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department. I'm not supposed to be doing the kind of things that I would love to be doing. And I'm very frustrated by it. I look at what's happening with the Justice Department. Why aren't they going after Hillary Clinton?
That was followed by an odd overture from the Justice Department to House Republicans on the same issue.
Sessions is considering the idea of appointing a second special counsel to investigate a number of Republican concerns, some involving Hillary Clinton.
The Justice Department sent a letter to Congress saying some of those Clinton issues are being investigated.
Sessions battled members of his own party over whether appointing a prosecutor to investigate the president's chief political rival was a good idea.
That's a huge deal. Tonight, we can't tell you whether a new Clinton prosecutor will be appointed, but historians note that political meddling with DOJ is one rule presidents break at their peril. George W. Bush's attorney general ultimately resigned over allegations politics played a role in retaliating against DOJ prosecutors. And of course, Nixon's attempt to thwart an investigation by firing his special prosecutor triggered a crisis paving the way to the end of his presidency.
The country tonight is in the midst of what may be the most serious constitutional crisis in its history. The president has fired the man you just saw, the special Watergate prosecutor, Archibald Cox. Because of the president's action, the attorney general has resigned. Richardson's deputy, William Ruckelshaus, has been fired. The president has abolished special Watergate prosecutor Cox's office.
The draft articles of impeachment against Nixon cited those same attempts to abuse DOJ investigative power for political ends. It's a process my next guest knows intimately. Michael Conway wrote part of the final report to the U.S. House recommending Nixon's impeachment. He went on to try hundreds of civil cases in Chicago. Thanks for being here. Do you view this story, which hasn't necessarily gotten as much attention as many other dramas in the Trump era, as significant in a historical context as DOJ meddling?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both President Nixon and President Trump have engaged in abuse of power. President Nixon did it, as you mentioned, Ari, directly in firing the special prosecutor, but he did it in other ways, too. And he did it in an interesting way in an antitrust case. There was an antitrust case pending against AT&T, and the president, first through his subordinates, and then in a White House taped call laced with profanity, told then Deputy Attorney General Richard Kleindienst to drop the case. The brief was due the next day. He said, drop the case. And then when Mr. Kleindienst was nominated as Attorney General, he was asked if there had been any White House pressure on him to drop the case. He denied it. Later, he pled guilty to lying to Congress in his confirmation hearing about that White House pressure. And of course, the more notable one that we remember is that President Nixon through his subordinates, went to the IRS, created an enemies list to ask the IRS to audit and investigate his political opponents and people from the McGovern campaign.
Right, and that was very explicit. You know, some folks will turn on the channel, they think we're in competition with CNN, and in a sense we are. But that's not really the lens I bring to this story. The question is one that would matter no matter who the journalist or entity or company is. It's a question of whether the DOJ is now doing something explicitly to target a critic in the mind of the president. What is the burden of proof for something like that? Because we don't know the answer publicly.
Well, when Congress passed the 3 articles of impeachment against President Nixon, the second one was called abuse of power. Tellingly, it got more votes than the article of impeachment about obstruction of justice. It passed with 28 out of 38 votes. And what the Congress said in our final report said was that an abuse of power does not have to be a criminal offense.
Right.
It is the president taking an action for an improper political purpose. And of course, we have, as you mentioned, the fact that the president is now urging the Department of Justice to investigate his political opponent, Hillary Clinton. And that's really the essence of abuse of power. He's taking a proper presidential power and using it for an improper purpose.
Michael Conway with the Nixon history, thank you for being here. I want to turn now to some more recent history, the Obama era. Karen Loeffler was a federal prosecutor under President Obama. She also, more broadly, spent 30 years at DOJ prosecuting bribery and conspiracy cases and served all the way up until the U.S. attorneys were removed by President Trump. Thank you for being here. How do you view these comments from this president about pursuing political opponents through the DOJ?
Well, I view them as it's just very difficult even to hear them. As a longtime member of the Department of Justice, that's an organization and department with a storied history of being objective, enforcing the laws of the United States without influence, without attention to political realities. And it's very difficult, and there's a separation wall that has gone on in almost all instances. I agree with Mr. Conway, but it just is astounding to someone who's been a member of the Department of Justice, was a member for a long time. There's a separation and a dedication and an oath that's taken to enforce the laws of the United States without influence. And this stuff matters.
And Karen, I want you to listen to some of what Donald Trump said during the campaign with an eye to whether this makes it worse for him to the extent that there are reviews of his conduct or potential obstruction or potential meddling. Here he was during the campaign.
If I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. People have been, their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done, and it's a disgrace.
Does that make it worse if there is any legal review ultimately here?
Well, it makes it worse because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of the Department of Justice and the role of the White House. There has always been a policy that the White House doesn't direct the Department of Justice what to do, and the Attorney General of the United States takes an oath to the laws of the United States and not to loyalty to the president. And it looks, third worldish to say, to sit there and say, I'm going to direct somebody to investigate you is not the role of the president. It's inappropriate and undermines the credibility of the Department of Justice, which is very important when you stand up representing the United States and takes actions like an indictment or a prosecution.
When you look at this,
it undermines the credibility. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please. No, I know you're out in Alaska, so we have a little bit of a delay. The other question was this real open question about whether antitrust enforcement, which, by the way, is not something that Republican administrations are typically known for being super aggressive about. If it's a jump ball, they tend to err on the side of letting companies do what they want or letting them merge within the law. And yet here we've seen something very different, which is them taking AT&T and Time Warner to court this week. Hasn't gotten a lot of attention. I think a lot of people aren't quite sure what to make of it. Do you view that, coupled with the president's comments about CNN and saying he wanted to get them through the merger, coupled with the head of the antitrust division having reversed himself because last year he said this wouldn't be an issue and now they're suing, do you view that as something that requires more scrutiny or more of a conspiracy theory at this point?
Well, I think it's going to require scrutiny of the motives for the bringing of the case. I can't talk to you about the substance of the case. I don't know enough about it. But I do know that, when the Department of Justice takes action, there has to be credibility to the action. And we've seen it, not in this context, we've already seen it in a number of other rulings by judges against the department where they look to the president's statements and they said, you know, the department can say one thing that they don't mean this, but the president is out there saying, I want to get them. And then that undermines the belief in the decisions. I don't know the substance of, you know, what the courts will do, but I think there will be investigation into the motives of bringing the case. And that makes the whole approach of justice, it undermines the credibility.
Karen Loeffler, this was your first time on the beat. I'm so glad we could get you on because after decades at DOJ, your expertise sorely needed right now. Thank you for making time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.